Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Apologies for absence. Liz, have we got any?
And we've received apologies from Councillor Andrew Stevens.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda point 2, disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. No, nothing. And prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips. No, okay. So minutes of the previous meeting. Just trying to juggle my screens here, bear with me a second. Okay. Does anybody have any issues with the minutes of the previous meeting? No. Okay, can we take those as accepted?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. And agenda point 5, public question time. Liz, I don't believe we've had any public questions, have we?
No, Chair.
Nope. Okay, so moving on to point 6, climate change update with green vehicle adoption. Councillor Lewis, would you like to bring us in on that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll be very brief. As members will be aware, we had a green fleet policy in place. We're probably one of the first councils to embark on this journey. We weren't starting from scratch. We did have a small pool car, about, I think Mark can clarify, but I think around probably 10 vehicles at that point. But we've expanded immensely, and Mark will, I'm sure, take you through the report to see the progress that we've made so far. There are a number of challenges. I think, we will be seeing as technology evolves that our larger vehicles will probably no doubt head towards hydrogen as opposed to electric. But those vehicles aren't there at the moment, in that market is quite weak at this point. Hence why we're looking at shorter term leases, looking at electric wherever we possibly can, but also keeping an eye on the future and the innovation that's coming through in the industry, and keeping on top of that. So, some things are early doors, but things are developing and coming forward, and Mark, I'm sure, will take you through and give you a bit more detail on that. But my thanks to Mark and the team doing a fantastic job. And again, there are things like grid connection and grid capacity. It's quite a complex picture, but I'll hand over to Mark, Chair, to take you through.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Chair, do you want me to run through the report, or do you want me to praise it for you?
I'm guessing everybody has already had a look at it. Maybe you could praise it for us?
It's easier for you, I think, isn't it? So we operate a very large fleet. We've got 945 road registered vehicles, and it's a very large and complex fleet. It's heavy goods, it's light commercial. 92% of it is diesel. 70% of it is what we call clean air compliant. So we are, as Councillor Lewis said, we're well on the way to a very effective and very efficient fleet. But we spend over £2 million a year just on diesel. So to give you an idea, the whole fleet costs us £7 million a year. So it's quite a large operation, something members probably don't realise, but they will when they see a lot of white vans this afternoon when they're out and about. The timescales we're working to in fleet are quite onerous. They're in this decade following the Declaration for Climate Emergency 2030. 2025, we have, and Welsh Government have, an ambition that all light commercial vehicles become ultra low emission. 2030, all our other vehicles are meant to be ultra low emission. At the same time, UK Government are banning the sale of new internal combustion engine car and vans, so that coincides with that deadline. 2035, UK Government is going to ban new hybrids, new internal combustion engine light vans and light trucks. And by 2040, UK Government is banning all internal combustion engine vehicles. So in Wales, we're trying to turn our corporate fleet around 10 years earlier than the UK Government are planning for. So it's quite a task. We currently got 73 battery electrics and 12 hybrids. So we've got 85 vehicles on the fleet as we stand. And there are another 32 got delivered last week, which are waiting to go out, which will take us past the 100 mark, the first council in Wales to do so. And we'll be hitting a 10% target of our fleet compared to other local authorities who are currently at about 4%. So we are well ahead in terms of performance. We've got 40 charge points installed across the council for fleet use. Another 50 will be operational by the end of May. So we'll have 90 charge points to support those vehicles. We secured £1 million in grants from Welsh Government for infrastructure and to support the cost differential between diesel and electric. And we've trained our vehicle mechanics to work on electric vehicles because there's a lack of resilience in the private sector. And our guys are now trained up to work on electric vehicles, which brings the service in-house stronger and enables us to transition a lot easier. We developed a strategy back in 2021 for the next 10 years to meet those targets of 2025 and 2030. We've tried to adopt a diesel by exception approach when we renew vehicles. It is becoming incredibly difficult to do that, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. It also means that we have to decarbonise business travel, establish the infrastructure for electric and hydrogen and other fuels, and the aim is to reduce our fleet emissions by over 95% by 2030. But the scale of the challenge is very, very significant. It's almost a corporate change program because anybody who uses or is served by a fleet vehicle will be affected by the change to green vehicles. We've got a conflict in terms of the short timescales of the next 7 years when we renew our vehicles every 5. And we have currently got something in the region of 370 vehicles due to be changed now, and another 470 by 2030. So we have nearly 900 vehicles to change by the time the deadlines come around. We do have a number of them that don't have a plan because they are funded either by grant or they're held by schools. Due to global effects at the moment, the supply chain is badly disrupted. We have very, very volatile pricing. To give you an indication, for me to order any vehicle at the moment, it's 12 months before it gets delivered. And that's how severe it is at the moment. The market itself is maturing beyond cars, but there are some technologies that are slow to give us viable alternatives in terms of the fleet. So diesel by exception is becoming harder, particularly at the heavy and the specialist end of the market. And we have the complication, we're trying to procure vehicles now for future operating models that we don't know what they're going to look like. The waste strategy being one, for example. We procured vehicles now, they may not be the correct vehicles for a change in waste strategy in a couple of years' time. And we're also very, very mindful, if we commit contractually to new vehicles and there are changes to service delivery, whereby it's reduced or whatever, then it's going to make it very, very difficult financially. The challenge in terms of infrastructure, where you pull up with your car or your van to the diesel pump or the petrol pump, we now have to bring the pump to the van in terms of charge points. We're going to be bringing in a back office system to manage the demand on those charge points, and we expect the total cost of infrastructure to be in excess of £1 million. So whereby we had diesel tanks in various sites up to now, we now have to put these charge points in various sites to service the vans. We're currently using a strategy of back to base and charge overnight. But we do have over 200 vans that go home with operatives so they can start in the morning straight on their jobs. And that makes it very, very complicated for us in terms of who charges the van, where and when. We obviously have grid capacity issues, as Councillor Lewis referred to, and we are looking at the role of renewables and alternative fuels such as hydrogen, such as biodiesel as well. But we have a significant financial gap in order to meet the 2030 target. We normally use revenue accounting for our light commercials and capital accounting for our heavies. Some of the vehicles due for renewal don't have any funding streams in the future. And we did a very much an indicative estimate for this report to work out what it would cost us by 2030. We expect it's going to cost us something in the region of £30 million additional by 2030 on capital and £25 million on revenue in total by the time we renew the whole fleet. Money we simply haven't got. I have to stress, members, that this is very much a guesstimate. It is incredibly difficult to forecast with inflation and not knowing the price of potential technologies over the next 7 years. So it's indicative, and I have to emphasise that. In terms of infrastructure, we probably need another £700,000 in the short term. What have we got? We've got £500,000 in a reserve at the moment, We don't know what the future UK or Welsh Government funding policies are going to be like. We're intending to reprofile our renewal programmes to 7 to 9 years instead of 5, which means you'll have an older vehicle fleet, but you'll have a lower carbon vehicle fleet. And that's one of the ways we can close the gap. That brings with risks of breakdowns and non-availability. We're trying to drive some efficiencies with downsizing vans. We're trying to get them to utilise them more. And the intention is that we will top slice some of the fuel budgets and use them for investment in the infrastructure, as diesel cost is obviously more expensive than electrical costs. Impact of hybrid working is not known yet on business travel, and we're hoping that as the markets mature, the costs will decrease. And we're working with Welsh Government. We're doing a collaborative procurement exercise across Wales where we aggregate our demand and therefore we hopefully drive the prices down with the manufacturers. Our main challenge are supply chain, future policy, grid capacity, viable options, and the resources to transition at the moment. And we know by going green, it is going to not only impact us financially, it'll impact us operationally, because things such as range and the way we work, it has to change because vehicles will not work in the same way on a lot of our fleet. The pathway 2025-2030 has been badly disrupted by global events the last couple of years. The financial realities are fostering some resistance to change, and we are looking at a mix of interim solutions, although they're going to cost us more. And the strategy itself will have to be cleverer, more incremental, more iterative as we go. We're going to have to be less charming about it and a bit more coercive in certain areas, I'm afraid. But we are doing okay. We're ahead of most local authorities, as I said. We're at 10%, where most are at 4%. But our expectations of 2025, 2030 are going to be really difficult to challenge me without the external funding. So I hope that gives members some indication of the progress we've made, the context, and the scale of the challenge we face in Green Fleet.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, just to come in briefly on the tail end of Mark's very frank and honest picture of where we currently are. I'm sure members of this committee will also be aware that when we've presented to you previously, we've made the point and stressed it that we do not have the budget to carry out many things. So we will need to continue to lobby hard to Welsh Government and UK Government to enable us to have the resources to be able to take this journey and to meet the targets that we want to meet. We simply don't have the resources in-house. There's a heavy price tag attached to this, and there's a heavy price tag attached to climate change and nature recovery. So I'm just stressing that point that Mark has raised. Really, we will continue to lobby hard, but we're heavily reliant on government grant funding to be able to achieve more.
Thank you. Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation there, Mark. It's great to see the council's got the aspirations to deal with the climate emergency, which is obviously threatening us all. What it seems to me, I mean, you touched on. I've got lots of questions, but I'll try and prioritise them really. You touched on the efficiency of our staff at the end and how work patterns would have to change. I mean, I'm not sure how that's been modelled, but obviously if that impacts on a lot on how many people we send to certain jobs, how long they've got to be there and that sort of thing. I mean, is it that we don't prioritise with those vehicles then, because if that, it almost feels like a false economy that, if we're changing those vehicles and then we've got to obviously get even more resources for staff, and that costs even more money, then maybe it's just not the thing that we do, and we prioritise with insulating schools or putting money into solar panels on schools. I'm wondering if this has been modelled in, are we chasing the the green fleet? Is that the correct use of money? Has someone modelled how best this money is spent if that money was available? That's my first question. The second is obviously where the electricity comes from is just as important as have we got green vehicles, So it's not just about lobbying Welsh Government and UK Government for money for for vehicles, it's also ensuring that, you know, those vehicles are, you know, we use renewable energy to charge them up, because otherwise there's no point in the whole exercise, you know. So are we looking at also, when we put these battery storage places in, are we looking at big batteries that, you know, could store that energy and maybe even generate renewable energy on site, really? And also, have we got a battery recycling policy in place for our EVs, was my other question. Is because obviously I think, you know, maybe we're not there yet, but in a few years, apparently, I don't know too much about it, but apparently they're quite hard to get rid of the electric battery. So quite a few questions there. Thanks.
If I tackle the impact on services, I suppose that's a simple one. In terms of efficiencies, what we're finding is that we have historically given operatives larger vans and they fill them. Simple thing, isn't it? Tradesmen will always fill a van up. We're downsizing the vans because we only work within a 50-kilometre radius. So by downsizing van sizes, we drive that efficiency in the first instance, and they come back to base and they collect the next material. So that's one example of it. The other issue we are facing at the moment is guys on standby, out of hours services, etc., who take the vehicles home, who can't charge them, and that's becoming a bit of an impasse. So what we're looking for from members is a bit of a steer on how far we go with Green Fleet. We have dealt with the lower hanging fruit. The modelling is starting to kick in, as you quite rightly refer, to understand the critical impacts on service areas, and we do not want to make false economies by putting 2 vans out where we could have used 1 historically under diesel. We are driven by the ambitions of Welsh Government and the council, so where we can, we will go electric. A second stage of that is hybrid, and beyond that, if we have to put a diesel vehicle in for efficiency purposes, then heads of service sign that off. So we are already beginning that modelling, but we've done the early 10%. It's the remaining 90% where the real challenges are going to come in terms of service delivery, to be fair. I'll jump to the battery recycling bit because I'm sure Councillor Lewis will answer some on the energy side of things. No, we don't have a policy in place at the moment. Invariably, our vehicles are 5 to 7 years old, so we haven't hit that issue whereby we're renewing batteries on the traction batteries on the EVs. And invariably, the stuff that we've got at the moment is revenue accounted, therefore we don't own the vehicle. So it's the supplier's obligation in terms of disposal. But I think we need to become more aware of it as we start writing our contracts to ensure that the full supply chain is sustainable as we go forward.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Keaton?
Sorry, Chair, if I could come in on the where does the electricity come from question. We're currently, as a local authority, we're using 100% renewable sources for our electricity. So it's 100% green at this point. I can't guarantee that going forward because we don't know what the markets are going to look like. And we're in a national framework, national procurement for energy along with other councils. So hopefully we will continue to purchase 100% green electricity.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Keaton?
Yeah, it was just picking up on both Will's and Mark's response about the fleet. I've read that it's better just to just use vehicles until their last legs or last wheels, as it were, rather than just replace them for the sake of saying we have electric. Better that we just keep using them. And whilst we're doing that, we're keeping an eye on the new market and worrying about the waste. That is going to be a big thing in the future. So the longer we can keep the stuff we've got going, better it is, I think. Rather than just I'm delighted we've got electric vehicles, but it's better to just use what we've got. And I think that's going to be the whole ethos all the way through. Don't spend money we don't have to and do stuff all we can. But it's really positive. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones?
Thank you. I'm going to turn the coin on its head, sorry. Whereas I'm really, keen on the green energy and the green vehicles. Mark made a comment that you're using smaller vehicles now, and they have to come back to the depot to pick up more stores or whatever it is they need. Thinking about productivity and how we manage that, because if you're working out, say, in Rossilli or Skirlage or wherever it is, and you have to come back to go to your next job, then that isn't in terms of efficiency either. So I'm wondering how on earth you're going to manage that with having a smaller van, but more trips back to the depot. I'm sure you've thought it through and you're going to give me a very good answer, but I know sometimes it's not practical to come back. I know we had the issue before that people were coming back for their lunch breaks, and yet they could have had a lunch break somewhere closer to where they were actually working in a council premises. So I will be interested to see how we're managing to actually overcome that as well. Thank you.
If I could, Councillor, we've deployed vehicle telematics on all our fleet, so we're fully aware, and that has driven efficiency in itself. When I said smaller vans, what you stop tradesmen doing is carrying the just-in-case stuff that they carry around for 4 or 5 years, bless them. And they all come back to depots invariably at some point during the day or the week. So we're not curtailing them down to anything that they can't actually operate. We're just minimising the opportunity for excess load, shall we say.
Thank you, Mark. Jeff, did you want to come in? No?
Thank you, Jeff. It was in response really to Councillor Thomas's sort of question and the wider debate around the fact that we're not just dealing with vehicles, clearly. I mean, the 2 reports you have in front of you today are all about the whole agenda for 2030. And vehicles are an important piece of the puzzle, but they are just one sort of piece of the puzzle. When you're looking at generation of electricity on site for renewables to charge up our existing vehicles, that's clearly part of the solution, but also part of the funding conundrum. We're working with a company called City Science as part of a regional area energy plan that will deal with greening the wider grid to try and ensure that all of Swansea basically is running off green electricity. So that obviously deals with issues around national grid in terms of other major consumers, in terms of generation, etc. So there is a much bigger picture here that we're all trying to sort of trying to solve when it comes to the 2030 and the 2050 agenda. Both the reports in front of you are really sort of only really talking about 2030, and as I say, we've concentrated on Mark's area, rightly so. He's doing incredibly well to try and move it forward. It's a difficult one, clearly, because a lot of it is down to cash. But we're looking at not just vehicles, but buildings, land, and the nature recovery side of things. So I'm just trying to sort of frame it in the whole picture. And we're not going to have all the answers to all the questions, but as you can probably see from both reports, there's a lot of activity around everything at the moment, and this is just one part of it. We won't ever consider one solution without considering the impacts and the dependencies elsewhere. Okay.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Jeff. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to throw this into the mix. Chicken and egg situation, because we're talking about green energy, renewable energy. But if you think about the turbines, for example, closest to Swansea on Minithaguire, they were erected on peat soil. So tons of concrete have gone into peat soil that had been there for generations was eroded and damaged, and that is a carbon sink. So I have some concerns about how we achieve some of our renewable energy. Other parts of Wales, there's been a bit of a controversy about the fact that the turbines have gone onto land hitherto occupied by trees. So hundreds of thousands of trees have been taken down. So shouldn't we be looking at the situation as a whole? When we talk about renewables, where is this energy coming from? Is it doing damage to other parts of the environment in order to achieve the renewable outcome, so to say? So it's just something that does concern me, and I wondered if anyone else had views on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, did you want to come in on this?
Yes, please. Perhaps if I can separate what we would call developments of national significance, like major solar farms, major wind turbines, which are outside of the council's control. But what we are looking at within the council's control is using renewable energies wherever we possibly can. And I know Jeff and the team are looking at accessing significant refit grants, for example. So on our public buildings, we will have energy generation and energy capture. And on our new public sector hub, we'll be trying to make it as efficient as we possibly can. And, you know, lead by example, really. In addition to that, we're also looking at solar on our council homes. So we've got money set aside over the next 4-year term to start that journey. But again, I stress we do need government funding to be able to roll that out at any significant pace. So wherever possible, we're looking at renewable technologies. We could look at our open air car parks and look at solar canopies as an example. All these things are being explored so that we can make sure that we have a good conscience where the electricity is coming from. But these are all works in progress at the moment, and we're happy to keep the committee updated as things progress.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Fitzgerald?
Sorry, I've had problems. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, not really. I just think this is a big conundrum and one that hasn't been properly addressed. And perhaps it is something that ought to be addressed more fully. I fully understand what Councillor Lewis is saying, and I must applaud the fact that when we are going to put solar panels onto council properties, it appears there's going to be batteries provided, because this is another issue. You know, I have a development in my ward, no gas, all solar panels, but of course there's no batteries. So if you happen to be working all day, it appears you are unable to benefit from having electricity generated from your solar panels. So there's a bit of a contention about it. But there are positives out there, but I think that there are some big issues that we need to consider and address. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Councillor Locke?
Yes, the question I'd like to ask is, how much more expensive are the electric vehicles in comparison to the diesel vehicles they are actually replacing? And that's not in terms of the lease, obviously.
If I can give you some examples then, Councillor. A standard small van as diesel is about 24,000. Full electric is 33,000. The electric refuse vehicle we brought on board, the heavy goods, the 27-ton, normally that would cost us 200,000. Fully electric is 430,000. We tried to change to diesel 18-ton skip lorries this year for electric. Diesel was 120,000. Electric was 280,000. So we're looking at, depending where you are in the market, the lighter commercial is something between 25 and 30% more expensive, of which you recover energy costs over the life of the vehicle. Heavy goods, we're looking at anything between 100% and 150% more expensive. And that reflects the maturity of the market in that sector in particular, because the options are simply not there. So hopefully that will illustrate why we're talking the sorts of tens of millions of pounds we're talking about at the moment.
Right, thank you.
Could I add to that, Chair, if that's okay? So at the start of certainly my journey, trying to green the fleet, working with Mark, actually, when you looked at the full term of the lease, in terms of the cost of the leasing of the vehicle and the cost of the electricity to run it, it actually evened out when you compared it with a petrol or diesel vehicle. Now where we are in terms of energy costs, that's no longer the case. So we can hope that through economies of scale, the cost of the vehicles will come down in price, but we will always have that ongoing concern about how much the actual energy will cost to run it, because we all know there's been a significant hike in energy bills, and that is also impacting on the green fleet as well.
Thank you. Councillor Keaton?
Yes, just catching up on what Andrea was saying, I think it is better for us to lease until the batteries and all the things that are going wrong at the moment with some of the electrical fleet are sorted. So I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. I was going to ask Mark about the weight of electric vehicles, especially the bigger ones. Is that an input we've got to consider as far as roads are concerned? No, that sounds a bit weird, but it all adds to it, doesn't it?
It's not weird at all. You will have picked up some of the noise in the press around car park, for example. Electric vehicles are heavier than the 1970s car parks designs we've got to face. The DVSA, our regulator, has made allowances because the vans are heavier than the current thresholds that we work to in terms of driver licensing, for example, and MOTs. So they've allowed us 750 kilograms per van to accommodate for the heavier traction batteries. But that means obviously you've got heavier vehicles on the road. The refuse vehicle is 27 tons, where we're normally at 26 tons. So you are starting to see increased axle loadings, and that will have an impact on the road network naturally. So yes, there will be an impact longer term, the more and more people transition, but it won't be just the network, it'll be the car parks, the bridges and stuff like that as well. So yes, very valid point.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping you were going to say, nah, no problem. There we go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald, did you have another question, or is that a legacy hand?
You're muted.
Sorry, Chair. I'm having problems with my icons this morning. They're not cooperating.
I'm sure we can all sympathise.
I clicked and they don't do what they're supposed to.
Are there any further questions on agenda point 6 from anyone? No. Oh, Jeff, did you want to come in with an additional point?
I did, yeah. One final point actually, which is obviously relevant in terms of this this panel. I think we've made reference to the fact there is so much that's happening in terms of performance indicators, performance measures, outcomes, and the rest of it, that we would be proposing that we report back to this panel committee annually, and that probably will be June once we've finalised all the outcomes of corporate plan objectives, all the PI reporting, all the reporting to Welsh Gov and the rest of it. I just wanted to make that specific point. It is relevant just to make sure you accept that reporting timeline.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? No, I think everyone's done for that one. So moving on to agenda point 7, achievement against corporate priorities, objectives and policy commitments. Who is leading on that? Is that you again, Councillor Lewis?
This actually sits with both myself and Councillor David Hopkins. I deal with the climate change elements, and Councillor Hopkins is responsible for the nature recovery side of things. So it spans both portfolios, but actually, Chair, I would argue it impacts all cabinet portfolios, which is why we're grateful when the committee specify exactly what they want to look at, because sometimes it sits with the responsible cabinet member. I'll use transport as an example, sitting with Cyril Anson and Andrew Stevens. So we're the overarching strategic leads, if you like.
Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of background noise. Could I remind everybody to please keep your mics on mute if you're not speaking? Thank you. Jeff, did you want to come in?
I will do, because to be fair to Councillor Lewis, she is right. This is such a broad area, which is evident by the content within the report. also evidence the fact that we are cutting ourselves into so many different pieces when it comes to meeting all the challenges around objectives, wellbeing objectives, policy commitments, all the performance indicators and the rest. So there's a lot of content here. There's not much point me going through every single element of the report, first of all, because that wouldn't make any sense to me either, because I didn't write it. But Rachel Lewis is my colleague who's put a lot of effort into putting together lots of the content. But we deal with wellbeing objectives around delivering on climate change and nature recovery. So that's biodiversity, climate change, the energy side of things, procurement, sustainable transport, schools, development around schools, council houses, waste, air, waste and soil quality. So that's a hugely broad agenda. Within the policy commitments as well, we've got specifics that relate to the performance indicators we're going to be reporting on an annual basis as part of the corporate plan. And we have other specifics around 100-day targets. So what we've tried to do is just identify some very specific activities to demonstrate action going forward. Now, I think it is positive. I think as an authority, we're doing a huge amount and working very well with our regional partners. But there are some sort of health warnings, and it comes back to what Mark was talking about and what we touched on before about cash. Ultimately, we're trying to do as much as we possibly can in terms of developing policies, doing some early activities and some early outcomes where we've got where we have the cash to do it. And refit is a good example that Councillor Lewis mentioned before, where we have interest-free loans as long as we can demonstrate a payback within I think it might actually be an 8-year period now. And we identified that as part of our net zero action plan. Around our buildings, we think with a spend of about £7 million, we can actually make reductions in our carbon emissions of about 4,000 tonnes a year. And that's effectively at, I would say no cost, because the reduction in our utility bills would pay for the cost alone over a 7-year period. And that's our first phase of how we are cost effectively reducing our emissions around our building stock, which is the biggest emitter in terms of the responsibility specifically related to the council. Now that's our first phase, and that's working through the process during the course of 23-24. And it was one of the specific actions that we said we would deliver on, and we will, and we are. But amongst that, you've also got all the activities around nature recovery, around sort of tree planting, and we're doing some work around tree canopy mapping as opposed to specifically looking at tree planting as a performance indicator, because just planting a sapling or a whip, as they're called, isn't necessarily as productive as planting a standards, but you plant less standards and less whips. So numbers isn't necessarily the right way of looking at it. What I'm trying to say is policies will develop, actions will continue, and we'll continue to report back to this group on an annual basis to show what progress we've made. But whilst it's positive in terms of what we're reporting on, it's still a very, very long and difficult road because there's so much that's happening, and we're doing it against a backdrop of a worsening financial climate and making sure we are using the resources as effectively as we possibly can. That's my long rambling introduction to what is a long rambling report, and happy to sort of pick up any questions as best we can possibly answer them. And I'll pass them all on to Rachel just in case I can't give you more detail, if that's all right. I'm sure she'll thank me afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, appreciated it. It's it is a huge item, and it does span several portfolios, granted. Councillor Hopkins, were there any additional points you wanted to make from your areas that you cover?
No, I think in fairness, last meeting, I think Paul Neller delivered, some of the work that we are doing with biodiversity and nature recovery across the county. I think at that point it was highlighted that we're very reliant on grant funding, and it has been predominantly over a 12-month basis. We are seeing some inroads in that and trying to work with Welsh Government to try to get better, longer, sort of, work through a 3-year period of grant funding. So a lot of work have gone on, but we don't do it alone. We work with partnership. We've got a nature partnership agreement. We work with the voluntary sector across the city. And to be honest, I think we are doing a lot, and I think, but it's what your public are doing as well. And I think raising that awareness is very important for us. And Jeff made the point early on, it's not the quantity of the trees, it's the quality, and making sure they're the right species, they're in the right place. So quite proud of the work that's gone on within our department. yeah, a lot more could be done with the finances, obviously, as been highlighted throughout everything we do at the moment. But I'm proud of the work that's gone on, particularly within nature recovery and the way that we've conducted ourselves and worked with Welsh Government on many of these. So nothing to add to the report, really. I know Paul Nero, as I said, give quite a comprehensive report on most of it last time.
That's great, thank you. Okay, are there any questions on that agenda point? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Looks like you're going to get away well in time for 11. Thank you for joining us. Moving on to agenda point 8, panel review of the year. Okay, so this is obviously our last meeting of the municipal year. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Sorry, just shuffling my online documents around again. Okay, I just really wanted to open up discussion about how panel members feel it's gone over the past year. Some of the questions that we might want to consider: have things worked well? What, if anything, could be done better? Has the work focused on the right things? What have we learned that would help us improve and develop future scrutiny? I don't know whether we want to take any of these questions individually, or just it might be easier to just give out any general thoughts about the work that we've done over the past year. Councillor Keaton?
Yeah, just two positives really. The first was that we've had a lot of trees planted in the West Cross area. I'm sure you've all had a lot of trees planted, and it's been done really well, and they have been very thoughtful where they went, and they're asking a lot of questions and keeping the public around them informed, and I think that's incredibly positive. Secondly, although it would be really nice to have a lot more finance to do what we need to do, I think the fact that we're all having to think carefully about what we get out of what the money we put in might actually be far more in line with being eco-conscious, because I think we could throw ourselves in if we'd had lots of money and panic and like buy loads of electrical vehicles and then find that they had to be renewed because the batteries weren't good or whatever else. So I think I'm trying to say every cloud is a silver lining here, that maybe that's not such a negative, whilst we're begging for more money, which would be lovely. So there we go. A bit of positivity there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? In terms of the work plan of the past year, are there any does anyone have any particular thoughts on whether we've covered the right areas in terms of scrutinising climate change and nature? Are there anything that we've particularly missed that you think we should include next year? Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks. The only thing that we did go over this a couple of years back, but it's something I don't feel we ever got to the bottom of, was with how the planning process works with biodiversity and how we can encourage people who are making small and large applications to, you know, work with nature and have better, really. We did cover it, but I personally don't think we nailed it. There's always things that could be improved. I think what I'd really love to see, you know, if possible, is when people are making applications for planning, maybe not an extension on a house, maybe, but if there's, or saying that's for the panel to look at, but you know, if there's a question in the planning process of how will this affect biodiversity, how are you hoping to improve by building these 3 houses here? What are you doing to, you know, enable hedgehogs to be able to move throughout the gardens, or, you know, bees to, you know, pollinate the plants? I think if you plant the seed in people's mind, excuse the pun, then maybe people will do more as well, without the, you know, without us having to fund things and force the hand. I think if the question's asked, people might do it voluntarily. So that's what would be great to get out of it. But how we go about that is obviously something that maybe we should look into. Thanks.
Yes, I know what you mean, like almost like some kind of a toolkit or checklist for people making planning applications that they could just look at, just to see whether they've considered these different aspects of nature, biodiversity, etc., as you say. Yeah, I think that would be a very helpful tool. Councillor Rowlands?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo basically what Councillor Keaton said, is that I think we've done some quite positive things within the panel. And also what Councillor Thomas just said about planning. I think that's vital for this panel, and it just doesn't seem to gel at the moment, and I think we're missing a trick. I really do. But also going back to what we were discussing earlier about battery storage, battery disposal. I think maybe I know, and it's not, I don't think it's up to Swansea Council, but maybe we should be. It would be worth a discussion within this group to even just to lobby Welsh Government and UK Government about it, because it seems that we're going to be on the back foot for this one in a couple of years' time, and the technology is changing so drastically at the moment that I do feel as if we're being a little bit left behind with that. So it would be nice to just have a discussion in this group, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Keaton?
Yes, well, I should have said before, and you probably knew it was coming, SUDS, the Sustainable Drainage Systems. They're a great idea, and we really need them to work, because otherwise we're going to get more and more plastic particles getting into seas and pollution and Lord knows what. If we can hold it in the same, in the place where the rain comes down, we're onto a winner. But I've seen some really bad SUDS practices, and I think we really need to be up on that, because otherwise we're just playing lip service to something that's incredibly important. So that would be my concern, that we need to look at that and make it work, And that fits in with what Will was saying. People have to be aware that they should be creating their own rain gardens and doing things in their gardens, in their spaces. And the more land that they take over, which is covered over, you know, in extensions, the more they have to think, well, how do we make up for that? And that's incredibly important. I wish everybody would go to the SUDS Days training, because you'd come out quite shaken up and inspired. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Keaton. Okay, are there any other comments on any of those questions or discussion points about the panel's work for the past year, or things that we'd like to look at going forward? Any further points there? Nope. Okay, well, so obviously it will be up to the future work programme will be discussed in the first climate change and nature scrutiny panel of the next municipal year. And obviously we can put forward planning, battery disposal and SUDS as potential topics for the next municipal year. So really, I'd just like to thank everyone for being so engaged and having such good, positive, constructive discussions, engaging really well with the reports and the officers. And I've certainly really enjoyed being a part of this panel, and I'd like to give everyone my thanks.
Thank you, been a pleasure.
Thank you.